Right, well, I mean, I was gonna film right in front of Wembley, but I maybe not. Maybe no, no, go away. Jeff fucking Leeds United have once again had a cheeky little visit to Wembley, and once again been somewhat let down by a performance that was not good enough in the first half, and in the second half we weren't allowed to have a performance. So in this video I'm going to run through the lineup, what happened in the first half, unfortunately, because that's the least fun part of this whole thing, and then the second half, including a lot of fan frustrations, and ultimately get an idea of what actually happened, sort of dissect the corpse of that weird game of football. And to start with, we're going to talk about the lineups. It was sort of exactly as was expected. There were a couple of question marks, one of them being around whether or not Joe Rodon was ready, Joe Rodon being sort of the key to our back line, I would say, and we saw that a little bit in the second half. Stack also very clearly not ready to start yet, therefore didn't start. I have a feeling those two are players that if they are ready for 90 minutes, will just start a game of football. That's not a question mark for me under Daniel Farke. Daniel Perry. Lucas Perry was expected to play from the beginning and did, and it made complete sense to me. I'm rather glad that he was allowed to play because there was a little bit of conversation around, well, do you start Darlow instead? For me, Perry did nothing wrong at any point. I have zero complaints about him. His passing was fine. Didn't have too much to save because in reality, Chelsea didn't have many chances in the slightest. Ultimately, fairly happy with the lineup. What I was less happy with was what followed in the first half. Because the first minute, specifically the first 36 seconds, I think, were good. Those were the seconds where the ball pinged around a bit, we picked up the ball, made a run, one of their players had a little bit of a lie down, and that took seemingly all of the momentum out of the game, which was a bit of a problem. We had a free kick from that point. The free kick did not go to plan, thank you, Autanaka. Clearly not the most consistent of free kick takers that we've got. And then the problems kicked in. And there's a few of them. First of all, we lost basically every second ball. Any time a long ball would happen, it would seemingly hit Calvert-Lewin or hit one of their players, float up, and there would not be a Leeds player anywhere near it, which is just without a doubt a little bit of an issue, especially when it's a little bit of an end-to-end boxy-boxy kind of game that we're trying to make it. If we want to play that high-intensity style of football, we need to bring some of that intensity, and we just sort of didn't. Which is added to by the fact that in midfield we were just outnumbered and outworked. Looking at their midfield three, it was Romeo Lavia, Moise Caicedo, and Enzo Fernandez. If you pick any of those 2-3 players and you combine their transfer values when they move to Chelsea, you get more than the overall value of our starting 11. So it's understandable that 3 of those players combined will cause a problem. The issue is, in the first half, we didn't really respond to what that problem was. We didn't say, Brendan, drop into midfield a little bit, stop them being outnumbered quite so badly. Same for Noah Okafor. Instead, they were just consistently outnumbered, they were consistently outworked, and didn't end up doing enough to sort of earn the right to try and outplay them, if that makes sense. We had none of the ball, but we didn't earn it. So that kind of all makes sense. When we did have the ball, we also panicked a little bit. I've seen people say that we were a little bit overawed by the match, and I kind of get that. Like, hold on, I'm just going to step forward a little bit. Like, this place is sort of English football mecca. It is the place that you go if you want sort of finals, semi-finals, World Cups, all that kind of stuff. So, for our entire side to see this place, and every time they have possession go a little bit spooked right now and rush passes and miss the vast majority of those passes, wasn't really good enough, and it meant that we just lost the ball time and time and time again. There were moments of quality, there were. For example, the ball that came into Calvert-Lewin that he just flicked around the corner, Aronson one-on-one, brilliant stuff. Has a go. I think he's a little unlucky there. I think it's a really good stop from Robert Sanchez. But still, those are the chances that we need to be taking if we want to be winning games like this, especially when the way that we were playing didn't really give us that many chances. So we come in at half-time after going a goal down because Pascal Struijk made a little bit of a boo-boo. Let's be honest here, I'm having to move because there are people heading in my direction to my filming spot. And I don't like vlogging when there are people nearby. But Pascal Struijk made a very, very silly mistake. Dithered on the ball a little bit too much. Lost the ball. We go a goal down and suddenly we're chasing a match that is going to be an incredibly difficult chase for us to win. So then you get into half-time and you think, well, Daniel Farke has got to change something. And that he did. Because you get into the second half and we make 2 changes, which I thought we were going to make changes. Things were looking genuinely a little bit dire in the first half, so it was a case of things have to change or we will just give up. And Joe Rodon came on. That was expected because it felt like Jakobiel was just behind the pace of the game. There were a few times where he just gave the ball away for chances, which was, in my opinion, not good enough. I would have personally said, yep, Biel off. I wouldn't have made the second change in the moment, but it absolutely worked out. I wouldn't have said Justin off, Stack on. Instead, I was more looking in the direction of maybe someone like a Dan James to bring that intensity. Didn't end up seeing Dan James at all, but I think Stack absolutely improved things by helping to pack out that midfield area. Because the moment you do that, you're in a position where your midfield is now Anton Stack and Ampadu and Tanaka, and with Bogle doing his right wing bombing on stuff, Aronson also cuts inside a little bit, which means that you've now got 4 players potentially playing centrally compared to their 3, which meant that we were in a much better position. And when we sort of applied ourselves, when we used that energy, it very much helped us and it really improved things. We were quicker, we moved the ball a little bit better, and we were ultimately heading in the right direction. Admittedly, little moments of quality were needed. DCL maybe could have done a little bit better with his chance, headed the ball on target, to be fair, opposite the direction of the goalkeeper, which is what you want to be doing if you are a striker, but savably, which was a little bit of an issue. And I think there were maybe some points as well where his hold-up play could have been better. The ball seemed to go long to him and it would just bounce off. And sure, in that second half, we were winning the second balls more often because we've packed out the midfield a little bit more. But it was also simultaneously a case of ideally make it easier to win those second balls so the rest of your team can help to improve things a little bit. Then we got to the situation that is potentially one of the more controversial ones, where whilst defending a little bit, ball goes out, I think it was Tosin Adarabioyo, goes up to Robert Sanchez, has a word with him, and then Robert Sanchez has a lie down for a little bit. And this lie down results in all of their squad going over to the touchline to have a little bit of a chat with their manager. I can't be arsed learning what their manager's name is. He's not going to be there for long. Even if they sign him permanently, he's there for 6 months. And the moment this happens, Ampadu goes over like, no, you're not going to do this because this is the most boring thing on the planet. We are trying to play a game of football here, and in spite of being apparently the Club World Cup champions, you are refusing to play a game of football against us. They throw a little bit of a shit fit because we're like, no, we'd like to play the game, please. That would be quite nice. But they've had enough time there to change their tactics. And at that point, things get a little bit trickier for us. And yeah, fair. Okay, if you want to change things tactically, change things tactically. Don't have someone pretend that they're injured. The one player that the referee can't order to go off, which I genuinely think the one way that you fix this problem is you say, yeah, if a goalkeeper goes down under no pressure from anybody at all, and they're very clearly faking it and their entire team goes over to the sideline, you tell the goalkeeper, off you get, put an outfielder in net for 30 seconds, maybe then you'll learn the lesson to not do it again. But then everything changed, and they started wasting time at every single opportunity, which we were better than them in the second half, in my opinion, for the time that we could play. But that time was effectively none, and I think there needs to be a little bit of a chat about the referee as well, because it felt like every single 50-50 fell their way. There were fouls that, when happened to Chelsea players in the box from a corner, would be given without a doubt. And then they didn't go to us in the second half when we're on the attack, and it's sort of irritating. There were yellow cards that they didn't get, that we immediately got afterwards, and it's sort of like, well, a tactical foul is a tactical foul. It's a yellow card every single time. And I think if he gets control of the match, we actually have a bit of a chance. Whereas the way that it did go, that chance was sort of taken. And that's not really the way you want it to be honest. When it comes to the other subs outside of Stack and Rodon, I think Mecha did his best. He did a pretty damn good job of working his way out of a couple of tight situations, but there wasn't a whole lot he could do because, again, with the issue with the ball sticking at the top of the pitch, the fact that in terms of the time he was on the pitch, not much football happened because of the Chelsea of it all. I think Nonto didn't really do too much either, which is a little bit of a shame because I think Nonto's one of those players that when he's got that spark, he's really got that spark to him. Didn't really show up today, which is a little bit of a shame. And then Longstaff, I think, came on a little bit too late to have an impact. Honestly, I wouldn't have done Longstaff. I would have done James because you wanted that little bit of pace, that little bit of change, that little bit of sort of impetus to grab a moment rather than Longstaff, who, sure, he can help control the game. That's not what we're trying to do in that moment. We're trying to go forwards. And sure, if Dan James comes on, then we're a little bit unbalanced for whatever extra time brings. But that's fine because we need to get to extra time in the first place, and I don't think Longstaff is the guy that gets us there. I think one of the mistakes that happened as well, this isn't related to the result at all, but I think Goodmanson staying on as long as he did was a problem. If he's injured properly, he shouldn't have played on for those ongoing minutes. I don't think it's going to be a big issue for our season. Again, I think we're safe already, but I think we'll pick up a few more points anyway. But I think Goodmanson potentially injuring himself could be a problem. And I would quite like him to be fit and healthy, but that's not the case at the moment. Ultimately, I think awful first half. Daniel Farke did pretty well to turn things around in the second, and then they did pretty well to just stop there being a game of football, which would have been incredibly close if we would have played enough of the game, but we didn't, which is a little bit of a stinker. I think we've ended up with the worst possible FA Cup final. We've ended up with two teams that both financially cheated to be where they are, that have fan bases that don't give a toss. I've seen it described as El Plastico, which I quite like as a name. But yeah, annoying. I think we deserve better. But let's move on and let's beat Burnley in response. That'd be lovely. Anyway. Can we just score at Wembley next time? That'd be nice. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe and comment and all that kind of stuff. And I will see you when I am back home and comfy and warm. Because blooming heck, it's cold standing outside Wembley with no one around. Toodaloo.